We are live. So I want to introduce everyone to Michael Daly with MKTG. He's going to be moderating our discussion today. Michael, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Zach. As Pat mentioned, I'm Michael Daly, work at MKTG. The team that I work with, we help Toyota with their Olympic and Paralympic sponsorship. So Toyota is a global sponsor of the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games. And then here in the U.S., a sponsor of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. So as part of that sponsorship, there are athlete partnerships, governing body partnerships, and different deals throughout the industry that we help the Toyota team manage. And part of that window, we've got Ian and Steve here joining us, and I'll turn it over to you guys for some introductions, but these are some world-class talents in their own respective rights. Ian, an agent, has been an agent for several years in the Olympic and Paralympic space. Steve, defending gold medalist from 2016 Paralympic Games. Not to steal all your thunder, Ian, I'll turn it over to you. And then Steve, if you want to give an intro after that.
Thanks, Michael. And happy to be here. And thanks for everybody joining. A little about myself. I grew up speed skating. So that was my introduction to the Olympic world and space. And I've loved it since day one. I went from being an athlete to school and a lot of different journeys to now working with Olympic, Paralympic athletes on sponsorship marketing, PR side for the last, 10 plus years, 15 plus years maybe now. So it's been quite a journey, and I get to meet great people like Michael and work with amazing athletes like Steve. So Steve, to you.
Yeah, I just want to highlight, guys, thanks so much for having me and thanks for logging on. My name is Steve Serio. I am the current co-captain of the men's wheelchair basketball team for Team USA. I've been a member of Team USA since 2006, which means I've competed in the last 3 Paralympic Games, finishing 4th in Beijing, which I don't recommend you doing as athletes or any athletes that you will maybe represent in the future. Won bronze in London in 2012 and culminated in a gold medal in Rio in 2016. I also work with a number of global sponsors. I work with a wheelchair manufacturer called Performax. Also working with Toyota and Nike respectively also. So again, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, I think to take a step back, over the next 60 minutes, the group here, for all the attendees that are tuned in, the group here on this panel, I think our intended takeaways are to share a little bit about our journey and how we got to where we are, the skill set that we've leaned on and kind of grown within each of our own journeys to help us get to where we are, and then a little bit about commitment and motivation to get to where we are. So I think as we share our story, we certainly want the group to ask questions, throw them in the chat. Zach, jump in if we've got good ones coming through. Happy to answer those, but keep the questions coming. I think the next round of questions, and Pat, jump in if you've got anything to add here.
I just want to say we're breaking new ground at Career Exploration Camp. We've never had a gold medal winner or a bronze medal winner or a 4th place finisher in Beijing involved in any type of camp. So we're setting new heights. So thank you, Steve. So we really appreciate. But I think that's what I'm so excited about this panel is we've got the business side, but we've got the athlete side too. And Steve, we haven't had that as part of the camp experience yet, where they don't understand why you need people to support you so you can do what you want to do. And then I don't know that our students truly understand what, Michael, you do and Ian does. So I guess that's why I'm just so excited. It's like a 360-degree understanding. So for anyone that's watching, you're going to learn what a sports agent does, which is what Ian does. And you're going to learn what sports marketers do, which is what Michael does. And you're going to understand the impact that they can make on athletes. I think all things considered, probably even everyone here on the panel, if you could pick between working in the sports business or being a professional athlete, I'd probably pick athlete. But that's not an option for everyone. So we shoot for the stars and fall in the clouds working in the business. So you guys are going to get all aspects of that. So that's what I'm all fired up for. So thank you very much. Michael, do you want me to play that video and then we can kind of start the conversation of how a sponsor and how you all support Steve. And then we definitely want to hear about Steve's progression to being a gold medalist as well. But do you want to start with that to set the tone?
For sure.
I'm going to pull up Steve's Instagram so you guys can make sure you're following him as well, because that's where I'm pulling the video from. So I'm going to play this, guys, and then we're going to lead into the conversation to bring this all to life. Once again, thank you very much. And I'm going to turn down the volume, Zach, so I don't blow up eardrums. Ready, set, go. Oh, shoot.
Can't see
I
it.
need to share my screen. Damn it.
Heard it.
I gotta share my screen. All right, we good? Yeah?
Good.
Good.
Yep.
The Olympic and Paralympic Games, a global tradition built on unity, a celebration of movement, performance, and the enduring human spirit. But when the stadiums fall silent and the world stands still, we keep pushing forward. In home gyms, driveways, and backyards, we stay motivated because we are made to move, to overcome. So when the world starts moving again, we'll be ready.
And Steve Serio
The
11,
Olympic and
give him a follow.
There we go.
So Michael, walk us through what we just watched.
Yeah, so that was a video that the Toyota team created shortly after, I guess it was late March, when COVID-19 was officially deemed a global pandemic and folks started going on lockdown in different cities across the world. Things started getting out of the normal that the world is used to. And I think from the Toyota side, what we've seen working with them is that they're committed to the athletes and supporting the athletes. So that was a video that they put together to not only showcase their support for the athletes, but to showcase that, you know, these athletes, Steve included, are world-class athletes. And even though things are not normal, these athletes are still working, still grinding, going to continue delivering at the highest level. And so when things get back to normal, ideally for Tokyo 2021 next summer, Olympic and Paralympic Games, these athletes will be ready to represent Team USA the way they always do, world-class performances. So the role that our team from an MKTG side played in that video, Toyota had a production agency that put the content together. We worked with agents like Ian to source some of the content, whether that's athletes training at a home gym, athletes training in the backyard, working with the agents to source that type of content that was then pieced together to. So a lot of collaboration. I think that's one of the biggest things in working with Ian and a lot of the other Team Toyota athlete representation is a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication, emails, calls, texts. If Toyota is looking for something, we're kind of the liaison between Toyota and the respective agencies to source content, source approvals. At the end of the day, get Toyota the content they need to create and deliver and push out world-class messaging that they do. And Steve, I know that one featured a lot of the Team Toyota roster. Can you just talk a little bit about, I know we chatted this earlier in the week, can you talk a little bit about your involvement with your sponsors, not just Toyota, but I know you'd mentioned Toyota, Nike, Performax. Can you just talk a little bit about how you interact with those groups, and then Ian, kind of your role as well in that?
Yeah. So as you guys can imagine, working with, you know, a global mobility company or a car manufacturer, a global apparel company, and a wheelchair manufacturer are all very, very different experiences. And I think my favorite part about having different experiences with different sponsors is that it allows me to highlight different aspects of my journey. and it allows me to mesh my journey along with the sponsor's messaging. So for instance, working with Toyota, they really highlight the fact that I have mobility needs, and hopefully with providing me with the tools for my mobility, I can accomplish dreams and things that I never dreamed possible. As an athlete, they basically lean into the idea of me having a disability to quote unquote inspire people to dream bigger. Whereas working with the Nike, Nike doesn't treat me like a wheelchair basketball player. They only treat me like an athlete. They have a messaging that basically says if you have a body, you are an athlete. And they like to highlight my on-court accomplishments a little bit more than maybe a Toyota would. So I think that the key to any successful sponsorship on the athlete side of things is to have a genuine connection with the sponsor's messaging. And that messaging can be very, very different. Obviously, working with a wheelchair manufacturer, that integration is pretty seamless. But the differences between Toyota and Nike are pretty vast. And it's just about finding the right connection with each of their messaging groups that creates a very successful relationship.
Awesome. And Ian, I know Steve just mentioned it, the connection and kind of that collaboration. Knowing your background as a former professional athlete on the ice, can you talk a little bit about how you kind of started with your current role? I think it was helping out a teammate who was looking for a potential partnership, and then it kind of flourished into what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's been a long journey, but as I mentioned earlier, I had started when I was a little kid on the ice skating, got to a certain level, and at that time it was about 2001 when a sponsorship, agents really started to grow in the Olympic space. So at that time, some of my teammates went on to have very successful careers and win a lot of medals and that fun part, but they were getting inquiries about, hey, could we sponsor you, and working with bigger brands. And at that point, some didn't know where to turn, and maybe because I was the older one of the group at 21 at that time, and in school, they said, could you help? And from that point, I just knew I loved the business side of the sport. So from kind of working with some teammates back then and harboring those relationships and continuing on my path when I stopped competing and finishing school and going through law school and connecting back, that was my full circle. But I always knew I wanted to come back to the Olympic space and work with Olympic athletes and Paralympic athletes. So that's full circle how we got to here. And then a little bit on what Michael touched upon and Steve. Obviously, your dream is being able to get to work with brands and partners that you just have a natural connection with, whether it's a personal connection that starts that relationship, or one because they're involved in the Olympic space and involved in a product or a category that is really necessary or important to the athlete. And in this case, for Steve, I think we've been very fortunate for the partners that he has. One of those, as mentioned earlier, was Toyota. And we'll use that as an example as we saw the video there. I think the work never stops or in the process. Once you're able to start the partnership, I always say that's really where the real work starts, as far as working with that and delivering on the deliverables, the asks in the partnership, and not just that, but making it a stronger and better relationship than it was from day one. And that video is countless hours of hard work for people like Michael, who worked with Toyota and their team on strategy of what to create. And then obviously with Steve, balancing everything he has going on professionally and working that to fit in what his obligations are under the contract. And in times like that we're going through now where things are different, I think one of the key elements is really being flexible and working hard with your partner to make sure, I think just making it a great partnership, even when it's been a bit unexpected of what that may look like with the games being postponed.
All right, we actually got some great questions in the chat. If I could just jump in here for a second. Kieran Wood asks, do the athletes reach out to the sponsors? Do the sponsors reach out to the athletes? What is that process like? I'm sure all of you could tackle this, whoever wants to take a whack at it.
Who?
I could jump in real quick. I know that for me, I didn't start working with sponsors until much later in my career. And I can tell you that before I even had representation, I used to get some sponsorship opportunities kind of reached out to me. But I 100% was not ready for the professional side of sports. And that's where I knew that this was kind of a space where I could kind of take advantage of, but I need to be 100% more professional about it. So I think that it's about 50-50, and Ian, correct me if I'm wrong. There are some sponsors that, slide into my DMs on social media or, shoot me a random email, but I think I also get plenty of opportunities kind of presented to me from Ian's side.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I would add to that, to Steve's point, a lot of brands will reach out to athletes directly or to their agents or representation directly if they know their story and they know a little bit about them. If athletes are a bit under the radar, it's a lot of times on the athlete or on the agent to share that information with the brands to make the brands know, hey, over here who's crushing it, and they haven't won any medals yet, but come next Paralympics, come next summer, they're going to be crushing it. And I think Ian and some other agents that we work with do a really good job of, even if there is not a designated need or designated desire for sponsoring additional athletes, they'll send an email, send a text message, send an article to say, hey, check out this story on one of my athletes. They've got coverage in, Forbes Sports, or they just finished on the podium at a recent World Cup event. And they do a really good job of letting the brand know, this is my athlete and they're doing a really good job. You should consider them if and when you want to sign another athlete. So then inevitably, if and when the brand does, they'll either reach out to the agent, reach out to the agency, the kind of the role that we play, to say, hey, we're interested. Who are some athletes that we should consider? And given those relationships with the agents, we can say, oh, we just heard about this new athlete who just had a World Cup podium finish and should be on the consideration list. So I think it's a lot of relationship building, but a good mix of brands reaching out and athletes reaching out to the brands. Zach, any other questions, or
yeah.
good for now?
We'll do another question. We got a question from Aviana Watts. This one is for Steve. It's, what was the transition like, from college basketball, to the Olympics? I'm sure there's a lot of differences. And one good was, I'm sure you could finally start making some money. So tell me about that transition.
Yeah, so just a very, very brief background. I was actually hurt when I was 11 months old and didn't start playing wheelchair basketball until I was about 15 or 16. So I made the jump from juniors to collegiate very, very quickly. And then after finishing my experience at the University of Illinois, my Team USA career kind of overlapped. And then I started to play professionally over in Europe. So my transition has been a little bit unique. I think that when it comes to my experience collegiately, it's more about building habits and making sure that you understand that this is a lifestyle that you're choosing as a professional athlete, even though you're not getting paid for it. The skills such as hard work and time management and professionalism all applies during your collegiate career, even though you're not getting paid. And then when you make that transition to being a professional athlete or a Team USA athlete, I think that it's a little bit of an easier transition. Obviously, nothing in college prepared me for working with sponsors, prepared me for working with Ian or Michael. But I think at least Ian and Michael understand that. They were very flexible in the beginning of making sure that I understand parts of my deliverables, parts of the things that I need to execute on. And then now it seems like it's a pretty seamless process. But I think my collegiate experience has definitely helped me as a Team USA athlete, but there's definitely some things I needed to learn on the fly as well.
Awesome. And I know you talked a little bit about flexibility. I think that's a good point, especially in the current state of the world with kind of putting previous plans on the back burner for now. I guess question for both of you, Ian and Steve, how are you kind of navigating the new norm from a business perspective with where we currently are?
Steve, I guess I'll start with that one. From my perspective, the biggest challenge is the uncertainty, just with the games and understanding how that role that plays with the athlete partners that they currently have, and what that looks like with the games not happening. And now we have a much longer window. So that's a bit challenging, but also exciting. It lends new opportunity. And then I think the hardest part is just not being able to get on an airplane and see your clients and get some FaceTime with them and make sure they're doing all right. And I think just being part of that. So those have been some of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, I know that on my side. This is the time in which I'm supposed to be peaking to compete in a Paralympic Games. So life is extremely different. I know that in the very beginning of the pandemic, I actually went through a little bit of a grieving process when the games were postponed, because we as Team USA athletes, we live in pretty much 4-year segments, and you're building up to this moment for the last 4 years. And I kind of shut down a little bit. Me and Ian kind of had to have a little conversation, a heart-to-heart, about how I won't be posting on social media. I don't really want to be taking any calls or hop on Zoom, because I was just not in the right place mentally. And I think that I needed to take some time for me specifically. But once we kind of wrapped our heads around the virus and the new situation and everything that's going on, I had to come to the realization that I still wanted to have an impact on this world, and Zoom is the way to do it right now. And you have to be okay with staring in front of a screen and talking with people and kind of interacting this way. And it's not necessarily better or worse. It's just different than having, a face-to-face interaction. So once everybody kind of wrapped their head around the situation, I know that as an athlete, I feel much more comfortable making appearances and hopping on a Zoom call now than I did at the very beginning of the pandemic, for sure.
I like it. I think one thing specific to the international sports landscape, so working with the Paralympics, whether it's competing from a speed skating perspective or wheelchair basketball perspective, the sport and the industry has taken you both to some really cool places. So a lighthearted question for you both: what's the coolest place that you've been to for your sport or for your work?
I get this question constantly, and I literally have a different answer every time I answer it, because anybody who's traveled, each experience has different highs and different lows. I'm personally a huge fan of Sydney. That's going to be my answer today. I love Australia, the people, the weather, the food. It's just a place that I can spend a lot of time. But my answer is literally different every time I get asked that question.
That works. Got a passport out today, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ian, what about you?
Yeah, I think my answer may change every time I'm asked that as well. But at Vancouver, for me, it's the first Olympics. I was working with some athletes that were competing that had sponsors that we had worked on, and we were all there together and part of the team. So for me, that'll always stand out.
Awesome. That's my little plug for working on the international side of things, is that work can take you to some really cool places. Not a knock against the NBA or NASCAR or any of those other leagues that can take you to some cool places in the US, but it's always cool when you get to travel the world with doing
Michael,
some work.
what's your answer?
What's that?
What's your answer? Let me guess. It changes every time, but what's your answer?
I would say London, that I worked in 2012. And it was just a very cool city, a lot of different cultures, all within walking distance. The city was very receptive to the Olympic athletes and the Paralympic athletes. They had a lot of good coverage on the on the local media of the Paralympic Games, which I thought was really cool. So I would say London. No wavering on that one. London it is. Ask me again tomorrow and it'll be London. Well, cool. Well, from a...
I think Zach, did you have a question that Alexis asked you maybe wanted to bring to the table?
Yeah, I got 2 questions coming at you, Ian. The first is from Zach Meinmeyer, who wants to know, is law school necessary to be a sports agent? And then also from Alexis Rawls, who wants to know, how difficult is it for agents to, land their first deals, get their foot in the door?
Yeah, I think both great questions. First question is law school necessary? Not at all. I think, as you probably heard from others, there's no direct path to get to working in sports or working on the agency side or working on the brand side. For me, it was more of a personal choice. I had the interest. I wanted to learn more about the law. I thought, based on my experience as an athlete, and then just seeing teammates work with agents and myself learning more about the business side, it was just a skill and a path that I thought would be very beneficial for me. And I still believe that, but there's also the side of me that said maybe I shouldn't have went down that path and taken a different direction. So if I was going to give any, I think, recommendation on law school or just that path, I think follow your passion, learn as much as you can, whether it's in graduate school or law school or your internships, make the most of those. And likely wherever you end up in the sports space, everyone there got there a little bit differently. So I think it's worth checking out, but and it's not right for everybody. So I think that hopefully gives a little bit of insight. And I think your path will probably change once you start in school and you apply to different schools. And the second one, and the second question was, Zach, what was the?
I'm mute.
You're muted, Zach.
Oh, it was how do you land your first deal in the sports agent world?
Land a great client. I think I'll always defer to this answer. I think there's a lot of amazing agents out there, and there's a lot of different skills that make agents great. But I think really getting to work with an amazing athlete or client is going to help facilitate you getting your first deal or working on that. So, and I think it's pretty hard to do a deal without a client unless you're maybe working on a brand side or you're just in the middle and an intermediary. But yeah, find yourself a great client and then start learning about that client and finding a great brand that fits with them.
Awesome. And my 2 cents on the, do you need a college degree specific or an industry specific college degree? I would say no as well. I went to school for general business school at University of South Carolina, management and marketing degrees, nothing really sports related. Got into the sports industry via relationships, which I'm sure for the folks listening to the call right now, that's probably the 1 millionth time you've heard it over the past few days. But it really is all about relationships, especially in the sports industry. Got connected with a person at my previous company, GMR Marketing, connected with her, learned a little bit more about the company, thought, wait a minute, these people all work in sports and they get paid to travel the country and go to NASCAR races and that's their job. I'm like, this is amazing. How do I learn more? So learned more about that company, tried to build more relationships and connect with a lot of people to learn more about what they do, what they like about the company and the industry, what they don't like about it. Ultimately, an internship opened up around the time I was graduating. So applied for that, got selected to be an intern for a couple months, and the rest is history. Worked there for several years and it was an amazing time. Met a lot of great people, but I think for the group on the call, that's a big one for me. And I think Ian and Steve would probably attest to it as well. Just building those great relationships, that great rapport, being nice to people. That seems like an obvious one, but it isn't always an obvious one, but be nice, be a good person. But those are some big takeaways for me and kind of my journey and how I got to where I am. But Ian and Steve, for you guys, I guess what is the one takeaway or one skill in your toolkit that you think is most important, whether it's one that you use every day or one that was most pivotal in getting you to where you are? What advice do you have for the folks tuned in on that one skill? If you had to recommend one, if you had to narrow it down to one, what would it be?
I know that, on the athlete side of things, I'm going to narrow it down to two. If that's okay. So the first one, and it's a tool that I actually have struggled with over the past, is social media. I mean, it's the thing that I feel sponsors kind of look for first, how the athlete uses their platform, to encourage, or change or encourage a better society, what's the impact that they're leaving. And I will say that for me personally, it's something I struggle with because I don't like to self-promote. I don't like to show people what I'm eating each day or where I am or the view that I'm looking at. So it's definitely been a tool that I've had to learn how to sharpen over the years. But the second one, and this is the most important one, is just being authentic. I think that everyone can tell, especially on social media, when an athlete or somebody is being fake or being paid to support a product. But when the athlete or whoever is truly supportive or truly behind that product or that messaging, everybody can feel it. And there's no such thing as creating something fake, I think, when it comes to, at least for mine and Ian's and yours relationship, about our relationship with Toyota or Nike or anything like that. So I think authenticity is the first and foremost thing I always try to look at, and I always try to remember when I'm dealing with different sponsors.
That's
Ian, what
great.
you got?
Yeah, that's great, Steve. I'm going to back up for 1 second and piggyback on what you were saying, Michael. As I think everybody's heard, relationships and network and meet everybody, and I absolutely think that's critical. The only things I would add to that is, especially since there's not one unique path to get where you're going, is one, don't be afraid to go out of your comfort zone. Try a lot of different things. And then in that process, build relationships in whatever path that is, because you just really never know on what path you're on, who you're going to meet in that relationship or in that network that's totally unrelated to sports, but will take you to sports somewhere down the road. And then make sure you have passion for it, because that'll shine through and people will see that and recognize. And if they see you have passion for whatever it is whether it's making sandwiches at the sandwich shop or in your classwork or whatever it may be. And then ultimately, and I think this goes back to the athlete in me, and definitely to the athlete in Steve, who's reached kind of the highest level over and over again. I think just strive to be great and be really, really good at what you do. People take notice of that. That makes building relationships, networking much easier when they've seen you just be successful in whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be in sport as an athlete, but just strive for that greatness. So I'm going to steal a quote from one of my clients. She uses it all the time. It's perfect practice makes perfect. And I think for me, that's the one lesson I would take away. And it can mean so many things, but if you're going to do something, try to do it right and do it over and over and over again, and you'll get great at it, and people will notice, and then you'll be able to have whatever opportunities that you want.
Can I ask a question?
Maybe.
If you guys address this, I had to step out of the room. I apologize, but I'd love to get some perspective. Steve, why did you pick Ian to be your agent? And then on the back end too, Michael, why did you guys at Toyota pick Steve to be a partner?
Yeah, that's a great question. The world of Paralympics have kind of been unexplored when it comes to a sponsorship side. And a lot of my experiences, not only, working with Ian, but working with other athletes, is just word of mouth. So when I was starting to get presented with a number of sponsorship opportunities, I asked another athlete who they have as representation or who they worked with previously. And I talked to a number of people, but I decided to go with Ian, not only for his ties to the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, but how professional he was from the very beginning. Even when we didn't have a formal relationship, he was authentic. He was a great guy, and he was professional from the start. And also he had, after doing a little bit more research and talking to other athletes, he had some experience with the Paralympic world, which, it's very rare. It's a very niche place for agents, and there's not a lot of representation on the Paralympic side. So to sort of go with someone who is already familiar with marketing a Paralympic athlete, that was a big key for me.
So then, Michael, you're representing Toyota, and you guys evaluate a lot of different athlete partnerships, and then formulate a lot of athlete partnerships. Like for an example, how many different athlete relationships have you guys had in the run up to the Olympics, or do you have?
Yeah, I think Toyota's current athlete portfolio is right around 30 athletes, and that's Olympic athletes, hopefuls who are looking to have their first big break in Tokyo, a few retired athletes. So it's a pretty robust portfolio within the industry. But I think to your earlier question, Pat, the athlete evaluation process, we try to structure that as much as possible with different criteria, whether it's quantitative metrics or qualitative. Obviously things like, is the athlete well known? Do they have an inspiring motivational story? Things that are less tangible, is their agent easy to work with? That's one. Are they responsive? If the client has a need and it's a timely need, do we think the agent and the athlete are going to be able to meet that deadline? Those are certainly factors. I think with Steve specifically, and this was something I was going to mention earlier with the skill set question, but Steve does a really great job of authentically, to his point exactly, authentically telling the Toyota story. So a lot of times with athlete partnerships, you'll see clients and brands bring those athletes into the corporate office to share their story with employees. So employees who work in finance, employees who work in research, employees who are not as tuned in to sponsorship, to sports, to working with these world-class athletes every day, bring those people in to hear from the athlete directly, to get some inspiration, to get some understanding of the athlete's story. And I think Steve does a really great job of being able to articulate his story specifically, which sounds like an easy thing to do, but it's really not. And then tying it naturally to the Toyotas, the Nikes, whatever that sponsor may be, being able to naturally integrate that sponsor messaging. I think it applies to social media where, yes, you could write a generic post and put a hashtag sponsored, and it doesn't really come across as genuine or authentic. Or you could really understand the brand, know the brand, and kind of, as cheesy as it sounds, right from the heart. And that's much more likely to connect with people who are reading that social media post, who are on site in the big conference room where the athlete is speaking. And I think Steve in particular does a really good job of that. But that's kind of a few different nuggets on how the athlete evaluation process goes. I know it's different depending on the brand as well. From what we've seen on the Toyota side, they are super committed to shifting their company from a vehicles company to a mobility company. So as part of that, Paralympic athletes can help really tell their story. And on the current Toyota roster, Steve, Jessica Long, who's a Paralympic swimmer, there's a lot of great Paralympic and Olympic athletes that can really help authentically tell that brand story.
I mean, I think that's important. And I appreciate you guys walking us through that, because it's just very, it's easy to understand, but hard to explain. It's like basically for our campers, you are who you hang out with. And Steve's brand is going to be represented by Ian. So he wants to make sure that's the kind of guy that I want representing me. And Michael and Toyota are going to be represented by an athlete. And they want to make sure that's the kind of person that represents our values, can do things that we think is important, and so on and so forth. Like, it's complex, but it's really that simple. And even to be very, like, Michael's a nice guy, but like if Ian wasn't jerk, he probably wouldn't be working with Steve, right? Like like, or I'm sorry, Michael wouldn't want to work with Steve if Ian was a jerk, right? It's all about who you know and who you're attaching yourselves to. I think that's an important piece of this. So that's branding, right? It's like you are who you hang out with. Zach, do we have any questions from the chat?
Yeah. Absolutely. We've got another question from Kieran Wood, which is for Steve. Is, as an Olympian, you got the 4-year off seasons, compared to, NBA, you only got one. So what's the training like, and would you play in other leagues to, stay game ready?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always tell people that being a Team USA athlete is a lifestyle. It's not like you don't go through training zones. It's like you either are a high performance athlete or you're not. We have a nonprofit that runs wheelchair basketball here in the United States of America called the National Wheelchair Basketball Association. So that's the league that I play in locally here. There's a number of NBA teams that have local wheelchair basketball affiliate teams. So being in New York, I play for the New York Knicks, and we win a lot, which is why the Knicks love us so much, because their able-bodied team might be struggling a little bit. But it's a lifestyle. So you're really building for this 4-year experience to be culminated in the Paralympic Games. But each year you're working on something specific to make sure that you're peaking at the right time. So I will say that there's never really an off season. During the summer months, that's when my Team USA requirements kick in. But then from about October until May, that's when I'm playing locally here in the US. So it's kind of it's an all year round type of thing. And again, it's more of a lifestyle than it is different seasons.
All right, I guess I'll ask another question from the chat then. This one's from Joseph. He wants to know, it's a little unclear. You can take it however you want. He just wants to know, how do I get an internship with a sports agency? I'll hand this one off to Michael or Ian.
Yeah, I can take that one. So at MKTG, usually every summer there is an internship program where for 6 months, someone can join the ranks as an intern, kind of learn how the industry ticks, learn how MKTG ticks. Really great opportunity to get your hands dirty. And that's on the MKTG website, usually November-ish of each year for the January class, and then late spring, early summer for the July class. So the plan is that January 2021, there will be a new batch of trainees, and I know MKTG has offices in Charlotte, where I'm based. We've got offices in Westport, Connecticut, New York City, Cincinnati, I think a few other offices throughout the country. But yeah, it's kind of a rolling basis of that internship program. But I think, again, I think the best way is to know people on the inside, so to speak, so that when you are applying, regardless of the company, whether it's MKTG, whether it's, anywhere, being able to tap into those relationships to say, hey, Pat, I just applied for a job at this organization. I know you work at that organization. Can you put in a good word and help my resume get to the top of the list? So, that's probably what I would recommend for getting your foot in the door on the agency side.
Ian, there's a question that came through as well about, like, if you're an agent, do you have to work with a firm? I know you've got your own firm, right, Ian? Kind of walk through that decision.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, you can either take the route, I think, as Michael shared a bit, on that formal process on looking for the internship, and hopefully maybe at a location that you'd want to work at. Next steps whenever you finish your internship or finish your classes. I chose, I guess, a different path. I had interned at a large agency before I went to law school. I made the decision not to stay at the agency and pursue kind of my career there and go to law school. And then when I finished, I was kind of faced with a similar decision of, would I want to go look and apply for jobs, whether in the sports space or the legal space, to a big or small firm. And I decided to just start my own shop. So I went that path. It's kind of non-traditional. So there's no I think, good way or bad way, but I'll step back and echo a little bit on what Michael said as far as he kind of outlined the formal process where many look for internships and such. I would say your internships, for whoever is listening, or the high school years, are starting now. If you love sports and you want to be involved in it, get involved. Get involved at the high school level, whether it's with a team there, or see if you can volunteer. And I say that is basically make yourself noticeable and known. Then you'll be able to ask for an internship and get one, or one will come from a place you never expect. I mean, as I went through the process and I applied for an internship at, like I said, a very large agency, I mean, there are thousands of applicants and whatever it may be, and who knows why you may or may not get that, maybe because you know somebody, or maybe just because you really stand out. What I had learned through that process was really, we have so much control of how we can control how we get those internships. So I recommend, if you love sport, go volunteer for a local sport, get involved, get engaged. You won't just be meeting somebody by reaching out and say, hey, I want to be in sport. You'll get involved because they'll actually see you doing it. And again, it doesn't have to be so directly towards what that next step will be. And I think with that, that'll also help you figure out maybe you want to be part of a bigger group or a smaller group like your own.
Steve, actually, Ian brought up volunteering, and someone asked, are there any internship or volunteer opportunities with any Paralympic basketball organizations?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the National Wheelchair Basketball Association does have an internship program. I don't know specifically how many interns that we select year round. I think it's anywhere from 1 to 4, depending on the time of the season. But on the website, nwba.org, you can definitely go on there and apply. And I think that it definitely provides a little bit of a different experience for you guys, just because, number one, it's a recreational sport and it's a nonprofit. So it's very different than working with, an MKTG or volunteering with Toyota or something. But also it's a very different marketing experience, marketing a Paralympic sport, than it is to do work for the NBA or something like that. So anybody who's looking to, kind of branch out from the 4 niche sports, or, with NASCAR in there, NWBA is always there.
Steve, can you talk a little bit about Challenged Athletes Foundation and the work that you've done with them over the years? Because I know they're, as we talk about adaptive athletes and kind of growing the sport and the awareness and the support for adaptive athletes, they're kind of a big player in that space.
Yeah. So as my career kind of winds down, and Tokyo will more than likely be my last Paralympic Games, I'm more focused on the impact that I can have off the court rather than the impact that I can have on it. And working with national nonprofits like the Challenged Athletes Foundation, who provide grants for sporting equipment for kids with disabilities all across the nation, that's become a really true passion of mine. And like you said, the impact that Paralympians can have on our world is making sure that the awareness and the impact that we have is left for a greater legacy for the next generation of adaptive sports athletes. And specifically working with CAF, not only are we helping provide the awareness for adaptive sports and wheelchair basketball specifically, but we're creating very tangible experiences by providing kids with running legs, or providing kids with wheelchair basketball wheelchairs that usually range from $3,000 to $5,000, or wheelchair tennis chairs. So I think that it's a very tangible way for us athletes to give back to the sport that has given us everything, but also, helping grow the awareness of wheelchair basketball and adaptive sports specifically. Like, for instance, before the pandemic in February, I went down and did an event with the New Orleans Pelicans that were sponsored through CAF, and got a chance to meet Zion and put him in a wheelchair, and he got to experience our sport a little bit. So it's just creating opportunities like that hopefully will leave a better impact on the sport that we have.
That's a big dude to get in a wheelchair.
Yeah, we have to actually bring, so whenever we go to an NBA arena like that, we have to bring wheelchairs specifically designed for like 6'9" and up players. And for some reason, like JJ Redick never shows up. It's always like Zion or like these crazy 7-footers that want to play wheelchair basketball. So we have a special wheelchair that's designed kind of for people who are very tall. but it's a really fun experience. And, you know, it's crazy how competitive these guys get, even with wheelchair basketball. So it's a really fun day to be a part of stuff like that.
We're getting ready to wind down. Zach, I want you to ask whatever question you want of this group before we start to close the book on this. And I know you came prepared because that was part of your homework. So you're ready to roll.
Yeah. I know I have some great questions, but I want to first make sure everyone in the chat gets their question in. There's a great question is, you know, you guys talked about connections, and I know you guys have said, they've heard networking, connections. How do you actually do it? You know, how do you actually, meet more people, build relationships, foster those relationships? Anyone can answer this one.
I would say provide value. So to Ian's point, get comfortable being uncomfortable. You might have to email someone out of the blue who you've never met before and say, hey, my name's Michael. Here's my story. Do you have 5 minutes to connect and tell me about your story? If they say yes, which hopefully they do, learn about them. If they give you any nuggets of, hey, I play for the New York Knicks, but I'm actually a really big New Orleans Pelicans fan, then keep that in the back of your mind. Next time you see some Pelicans stories, you can send it to them via email and say, hey, saw the Pelicans did this. Good luck to the Pelicans this season. Give them a reason to remember you. And it's not always easy. It's not always quick. You know, if you talk to someone this week and expect them to get you a job connection next week, it might not always work that way. It might be a longer term commitment, but I would say try to provide some value, stay on their radar because of the value you're providing. And then ultimately, if they have the opportunity to help you, that's fantastic. But at the same time, be prepared to help them if they ask you for something as well. Kind of a two-way street.
All right.
Ian, Steve, jump in if you got anything to add on that one. I don't want to hog.
Start your own YouTube channel.
Yep.
Zach, I mean, right? Like,
Yep.
Can you answer that question for your campers here? I mean, how you're doing the same thing. Tell them what you do and how they can do it.
Absolutely. I'm just like everyone watching. I wanted to learn more about the sports industry. So, some people, I just wanted to learn directly from them. So I just reached out to them, and then I started getting a lot of people, and every person you meet introduces you to someone else. So I've been able to get so many people, and I created my own YouTube channel, Interviews with Zach Yakub. Sorry for the plug. But yeah, I actually have a question for you, Steve, which is, what made you choose, basketball? What is it about basketball that you love?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am a prototypical team sport athlete, and that's where all my motivation comes from. It's where all of my positive experiences come from. And basketball is the ultimate team game. It's when you guys all see it when NBA teams or any basketball team plays as a 5-man unit. It's just a work of art, and it's something that we always strive to do. Especially on Team USA, I love the idea of being on a team with 11 other athletes that are in similar situations to yourself, that are giving everything that they have each and every day for their greater good. And wheelchair basketball, basketball specifically, is the perfect sport for that.
That's great.
And Steve, real quick, in Rio, was it the first time ever when it was Team USA, men's team, women's team winning gold at the Olympics, men's team, women's team winning gold at the Paralympics, right? Full sweep?
It was the first time of a full sweep, and thanks for bringing that up, because it was definitely our team that was the outlier for all of those years, because obviously we dominate in the able-bodied side of things, and our female team on wheelchair basketball is just as dominant. So it took us a little bit of time to catch up, but we eventually got there. And yes, in Rio, it was the first time that we had a 4 gold medal sweep.
Rio's all that matters. We don't worry about
That's right.
Before Rio. Nice.
Yeah.
Zach, one more question before we get these guys out of here.
We actually got all the questions.
Yeah, no, I want from you. I want a question from you, Zach.
Okay, let me go to my list of questions. Let's see.
To get your question.
Ian, tell me about, the best part about your job. I'm sure working with athletes is pretty cool. Working with guys like Steve, what's the best part about your job?
Yeah, you said it. It's just working with great people, such inspiring people, dedicated, motivated. I joke all the time. I probably watch different kind of videos and accomplishments of all the athletes that I work with to just stay focused and motivated. They motivate me to be better in all walks of my life. So I'm thankful just to be affiliated with greatness and hopefully do my part with it.
That's awesome. And
Michael, favorite part about your job? We know Steve's is winning gold medals.
Yeah, Steve's is the hardware. Favorite part about my job, I think similar to what Ian said, being part of the Olympics and Paralympics, it's really the biggest sporting event in the world. Every 2 years, every 4 years for summer. But being a part of something like that where the world is tuning into what you're doing. And I think on the Toyota side, the Toyota team that we work with, they are going to be pushing out some really cool content next summer in the lead up to Tokyo to kind of boost the stories of some of the Paralympic athletes and Olympic athletes that will hopefully inspire a lot of people in the US and around the world. So to play a very, very, very small role in that is something that is very cool. And as mentioned earlier, work can take you to some really cool places.
The favorite part about my job is listening to people such as yourselves talk about your job. So thank you so much, Steve, for joining us. Really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you sharing just some of the mental hurdles we've all been going through, athlete or no athlete, during COVID-19 and jumping on Zoom. I know it's not how you want to talk to us, but it's how we want to learn from you. It's better than not learning from you. So we appreciate that. Ian, thank you so much. Your perspective as an athlete and also as an agent is like unparalleled and awesome for this group. So thank you so much for sharing. And Michael, you are a great moderator, as always, super enthusiastic and very decisive about your answers, which I really appreciate. Zach, how'd we do?
did good. Did great. Everyone did good.
All right, man. Thanks for that, Zach. We need your feedback. Campers, thanks again for joining. I hope you really enjoyed it. A couple people asked for LinkedIn. I gave you their name. Just Google it. Go to LinkedIn.com, type it in. I'm not going to do all the work for you guys. You can take it a step further.
Be comfortable being uncomfortable. Searching
Exactly.
on LinkedIn.
And say, hey, Ian, really great comments, or hey, Michael, great haircut, or Steve, I want to go to Australia. Like, include an actual note in there. Be personable, and you're going to find that they're going to be much more receptive to it. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Campers, we've got some more college sessions at 3:00, so check that out. And once again, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. Steve, best of luck in your training. Ian, best of luck with everything. Michael,
Appreciate
thank you
it.
for
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Good
everyone.
stuff.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.